everybody, and welcome to Story Time today. And this is a story about trying to find a monster. By Malorie Blackman, illustrated by Dapo Adiola. Breakfast in 10 minutes, called Dad. Come on, said Charlie. We need to find... That's right, the monster.
Reading was my lifeline. We were kind of one step up from sleeping on park benches. Books told me I wasn't alone and made me believe I could get through it. Made me believe that I was going through it now, but it wouldn't last forever. It was a world I loved, but I kind of did feel that it didn't love me back because I couldn't see myself in any of the books I was reading. Without ever asking or being told, I thought I knew why there were no black people in the books I was reading. It was because black writers didn't exist.
Malorie Blackman has spent 3 decades writing unseen children back into literature.
I knew it was Malorie Blackman, you know. I was sitting there, I was like, that's Malorie Blackman. I thought I was going crazy.
Her books aim to represent the experience of British children in all their rich diversity.
Searching every corner of my mind.
Long before there was this craving for diversity.
Looking for the answers I can't find.
Long before Black Lives Matter made publishing sit up and think. She has been doing that for more than 20 years.
There's something so visionary about what she's done. Malorie stood firm in her writing to have really big conversations about what we need to do to make the world better.
I'm Malorie Blackman. You were expecting me, right?
Right, the first thing that I want you guys to think about is this idea that Noughts and Crosses is set in this world where a group of people are treated as second-class citizens because of the colour of their skin.
First published 21 years ago, Malorie Blackman's Noughts and Crosses is taught in hundreds of schools across the country. It's set in an alternate Britain, with one major twist. The ruling majority, a race called the Crosses, is black. The underclass, known as the Noughts, is white.
Nought sounds like nothing, zeros, and crosses I could have crosses who consider themselves kind of closer to God in every way.
So Malorie Blackman's reversed that familiar historical situation so that the people that are discriminated against are those with white skin, the Noughts.
This is like the only book I've read in school that I'd actually wanted to keep on reading. And we've done a lot of Shakespeare, but I just don't think it's as interesting as Noughts and Crosses.
Noughts and Crosses is the story of Seffi and Callum, childhood friends who fall in love against the odds. Callum is white, Seffi is black.
By tipping the world up the other way, so reversing the power structure, the race structure, so she creates this black patriarchy, and just as in Romeo and Juliet, the power structure feeds right into their lives and their loves. And I think it's one of the things that makes the book so powerful.
There's a ticket. I handed it over to Callum. I had raided my bank account to get enough to buy 2 first-class tickets. This day is going to be perfect. I could feel it in my water.
We were on our way to Celebration Park. There were only 3 more stops to go. When they got on, police officers. Where did you get the money to buy this kind of ticket? I looked up at them, but didn't speak.
Seffi doesn't realise what racism really is, and she doesn't really see it. And I thought that that really made me think about how sometimes as a white, I don't see racism.
I think she did something so simple. She just held up a mirror to society and pointed it back at us. And I guess a lot of people do call it dystopian, but for me, it really wasn't. It was just showing what was already there.
I asked you a question, boy. Did you buy this ticket? No, I didn't, I replied. How dare a Noughts in first class? It's outrageous.
People have said about children's books is that they're in the genre of comedy. That's to say, everything gets resolved. And by and large, tragedy, children's books and even young adult books don't go there. But with Noughts and Crosses, Malorie has dared to go there. So Malorie has written what I think is, in a way, a classical tragedy for young adults, teens, maybe even pre-teens, maybe even some 11, 12 and 13-year-olds are picking it up. So they're perhaps getting their first taste of tragedy from Malorie.
I thought the story was going to be about how they ran away and what's going to happen, and then we read the last pages and Callum died. So that wasn't good. That wasn't good.
Things don't go well for the star-crossed lovers. Railing against the backdrop of fear and betrayal, Callum turns to violent crime, goes on the run, and meets a tragic end.
He pulls the hood over my head. I try to pull back. I'm not trying to run away, I just want to see her. One last time. The hood is over my head and hangs down to my shoulders. The world is black as night. Jack pulls my arm to lead me to the rope. Please, God, I don't want to die.
In Noughts and Crosses, the fact that the kind of hero of the book, Callum, dies,
Yes.
that must have been a tough decision.
There was a moment where I thought, should I change this ending? Is this a bit too hard-hitting? And I thought, no, you can't. You've got to be truthful to it. And the whole point of it is that bigotry and prejudice, they maim and they kill. And racism kills. To shy away from that would be doing a disservice to the story. And it would be me kind of backing away from the story I wanted to tell. And it was so bizarre because I was right at the end and there were tears coming down my face, and it was so, I just thought, oh, you numpty, come on. I thought, no, you've got to stick to it. You've got to stick to this ending.
There's no sound except the rope creaking and groaning as Callum's body swings slowly to and fro. Did he hear me? I don't know. He must have heard me. Did he say I love you too? Maybe I just imagined it. I can't be certain. I don't know. Dear God, please let him have heard me. Please. Please, if you're up there, somewhere.
A lot of people would say, my God, those are books written for young people. And yet, within them, there are traumas and crisis and evil. But of course, fairy tales were like that, weren't they?
Absolutely. Fairy stories were really they were quite bloody and gruesome, and quite hard hitting. The Little Mermaid did not triumph at the end. You know, she lost her life. What fairy stories taught me was that evil exists in the world, but there's a way to overcome evil. And I think that's the basic message for a number of traditional tales, myths and legends and so forth, where it's about the character of the person going through their traumas, where evil can be overcome. And it's such an important message. I'm not into this idea of we can't tell children that there is evil exists and whatever. It does. What we need to do is arm them for it, prepare them for it, so that they can recognise it and so that they can challenge it and stand up to it. With my own work, for example, the end of Noughts and Crosses, it might not be a happy ending, but I hope it's a hopeful ending because the hope is with the next generation.
Everyone feels like she's their, big storytelling godmother.
She was the person that was most visible.
I just love writing for children and young adults. And I think
she was the first Black woman to be a children's laureate in this country, and she's been the only one since.
People think they know Malorie Blackman, but it's only what she's chosen to share with the world. I think the biggest revelations get into actually how her life inspired her writing. So if we go from, I've got it down as...
This year, Malorie publishes her autobiography, Just Sane. It's the first time she's opened up about the life that made her a writer.
We writers are life vampires. We draw on real-life negative and positive experiences to write the truth into fiction.
You say in the book, this is the hardest thing I've ever done.
Oh, God, yeah. It really was. Samara was really good at telling me to kind of dig deeper, and not shy away from painful moments. But there were certain things where I thought, I have deliberately tried to forget about that stuff. I have deliberately kind of buried that stuff. And now you're asking me to dig it all up again or kind of just really kind of go there. I buried my true self until it became hidden, even from myself. It took time to reclaim that person, to realize her worth. Because without her, I wouldn't have been able to write stories.
You fell in love from a very early age with books and libraries.
Yes, yes.
That was the place to be.
This is Bromley Library. I have lived in Bromley for 22 years, I think it is, and I actually wrote some of Noughts and Crosses here. I think it was across there. My mum took me to a library when I was like 5, 6, I think it was. And then from the time I was 7, I lived at my local library.
There was something missing from those books that you read, wasn't there?
I was missing from them. Or, you know, black children were missing from them. Children of colour were missing from them. People have said to me in the past, oh, children don't see that. Children don't see that. Well, yes, they do. Each book was full of descriptions of characters with pale skin, milky skin, porcelain skin, alabaster skin, which blushed and flushed and turned red, and I would skim over those sentences. Such descriptions took me out of whatever story I was reading, not because the stories contained white protagonists, but because all the stories I read featured white protagonists.
Born and raised in South London, Malorie grew up alongside 4 siblings and her parents, Ruby and Joe.
My mum and dad came to Britain from Barbados at the invitation of the then government to do the jobs that white people didn't want to do. My dad was a master craftsman carpenter, but he drove buses when he arrived in Britain. My mum worked in a factory as a machinist, making pyjamas, soft furnishings and stuffed toys.
Now, your parents were both born in Barbados, but your father did not want you to speak Bajan because you spoke Bajan. What happened?
His thing was, speak English. You've got to speak the Queen's English. But every time I used a Bajan idiom or a Bajan phrase or whatever, he'd be all over me, kind of, no, speak English, speak proper English. Because his thing was, in this country, as a black woman, you need to work twice as hard to get half as far. And that includes people judging you on the way you speak. I absolutely understand why he did it, and he was trying to look out for me. But I do kind of feel that's part of my background that was denied to me.
The young Malorie moved all over southeast London, the frequent upheavals a result of her dad's gambling habit.
The library began to feel like a home from home, a refuge that I could take ownership of because it was free for all to use. And it became increasingly needed as the quarrels between Mum and Dad over his gambling grew more frequent.
When Malorie was 13, her childhood ended. We're talking about traumas not in fiction anymore, but in real life. This moment, this shocking revelation that happens when you go back home one day, no one is there, you find a letter on the mirror in your mother's bedroom.
Basically, the gist of it was that my dad was leaving and that he wasn't going to come back, and he had been unhappy for some time and he was out the door. So I thought, oh my God, and put the letter back where I found it. And my mum came home and was in her room for quite some time, but she didn't say anything, and we had dinner as usual. And then the next day I got home from school and bailiffs were at the door chucking us out the house. and we were homeless. That was it. They put us in a homeless shelter, and it was horrible. It was one of those experiences where one day my life is normal, and then the next day I'm thinking, how did we get here? It was a place for the nothings of nowhere, the deserted and the destitute, the forlorn and the forgotten, the broken and the bereft. That's what I felt as I lay awake with cold, hard reality continuously punching at my head.
So are you seriously telling me that you have not been here since essentially you were 13 years old?
Correct. I mean, when we moved out, it was one of those things that I thought, I'd never want to see it again, never want to come here again. So, no, I haven't been back. This is the first time in decades, so this is going to be a bit weird.
This is it.
This is it. Second floor. So we weren't right at the top, we were on the second floor. Yeah, it's the first time, I must admit, I've had a proper look since I moved. We lived here in the summer of '76 when it was really, really hot, and the place was like an oven, it was a furnace. And then in the winter it was freezing, so it was just, and no central heating, we had to live on paraffin heaters. And it was just full of vermin, it was just horrible. This just feels like, one of the lowest points of my life.
And when you think of the trauma that your mother must have gone through in those days.
There's an awful lot she didn't even tell us, and I didn't appreciate until I was much older. But I certainly think she kind of taught me resilience, and she taught me you've got to keep going for it, which is a lesson that I hope I've passed on to my daughter. Whew. It does feel strange, sorry. I'm sorry, it does feel strange, kind of just remembering everything. For a long, long time, my friends didn't know what I'd gone through. I didn't tell anybody. I came up with some excuse why I couldn't go on school trips and so on. They'd all go into a sweet shop to buy stuff and it'd be, I'm not hungry. Always making excuses for not being able to do things, not being able to go to various places that they were going. Mum had to hand wash everything, and then it got dried in front of a heater. So then it has that sort of mildewy, damp smell. So I kind of kept away from people because I didn't want people thinking, you smell a bit weird, or, because we couldn't dry our clothes properly. When you don't have money, your food comes with yellow stickers, if it comes at all. You shop at the end of the day when the bargains creep out to play in the reduced price food bins. When you're broke, it's not a choice of eating or heating. You can't do either. So you drink a lot of water to fill yourself up. You crunch on cream crackers that take a long time to chew and swallow. It fools your stomach into believing it's receiving more weight, more mass, more substance than is really there. When you're broke, life is an arithmetic game of survival. When you're broke. For those who haven't gone through it, sometimes it's the, just have a bag of pasta and make it last a week kind of nonsense. And I think you have obviously never been hard up for money in your life, because otherwise you would not say things like that. Only last week I was watching something where a teacher was saying she's had children who are chewing on toilet paper or cotton wool to fill up their stomachs. And this is 2022, and we have children in Britain doing that. Something has gone very wrong somewhere. I walked to and from secondary school almost 3 miles each way every day. As I had no money for bus fares, I had no choice. There were days when I walked home silently crying with tiredness, And there were many nights when I just cried. I knew my way to a sort of better life would be the education I got behind me. At 16, I was contemplating just giving up school and getting a job.
So you were working here as well when you were at school? You would work on Saturdays and then you'd work...
Yeah, I had Saturday jobs. My first Saturday job was at Littlewoods. And then, and I used to work in the summer holidays because, I mean, I'd work every spare moment because, you know, we had to make some money. I'll tell you something, it does teach you about human nature.
Explain.
Well, you get the customers who are lovely and who and they're grateful for help. And you get those customers who think because you're serving them, they can talk to you and treat you any way they want to. So it was a really good insight into human nature and how people treat you, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah. There was markets as well?
There was always the market. And it was when I was 14, in fact, when I started earning money, that I went into my first bookshop. I'd never been into a bookshop before then.
What, you always went to libraries?
I always went to libraries. I had no money.
On the brink of leaving school to support her family, Malorie won a maintenance grant which allowed her to stay on for A-levels. And there she found the hero of her dreams.
It is the cause. It is the cause, O my soul. Let me not name it to you, you chaste stars.
Othello was the first black character Malorie found in the canon of English literature.
Yet I'll not shed her blood, nor scar that whiter skin of hers than snow, and smooth as monumental alabaster. Yet she must die.
Yes, Othello was an arse, and all he had to do was sit and speak to his wife about the wandering hanky, but he was newly married and, more importantly, newly in love. I excused his foolishness because, damn, here was a black man in a Shakespeare play.
You even write very entertainingly about Shakespeare. About, okay, he could be a bit of a creep. He peed like everybody else.
Yeah, exactly.
He might have been a bit of a misogynist, but still he was bloody good. And as for that Othello guy, at least he was black.
Yeah, I mean, when you study Shakespeare at school, it's very easy to think of him as an icon and some untouchable. My teacher turned around and said, do you know, I'm sure Shakespeare had a dose of the clap when he wrote this story because it's so misogynistic. And we were like 17-year-olds and thought we were so sophisticated. And every jaw dropped. It was like, it was the very first time I had thought of Shakespeare as a real man. And that was sort of revelatory because I just thought, you know what, these writers are human. They live their lives and then they just happen to, you know, they write stories. And maybe the seed was kind of just, was buried in my subconscious there. Even when I was at my lowest ebb, even when I was absolutely despairing as to what was going on in my life, books taught me and showed me that there was something better. I read books that took me to faraway places and spaces, the troubled past, the hopeful future. I read books where I could be rich and go anywhere, do anything, be anyone I wanted. It was a life raft for me, really, kind of a way of embracing the world outside of my own. What those books did was they taught me about other people's concerns and their lives, and it also taught me empathy.
Like books, films became an important means of escape. Malorie saved up for occasional trips to the cinema, but when she was 14, an outing to Robin Hood turned nasty.
I tried to concentrate on the screen, but the boys behind me had my full attention instead. Then the comments started. Comments about black girls being up for it, and all looking the same, and much worse. Time to go. I stood up to leave and was immediately pushed back down into my seat by rough hands. Two of the boys sitting to my left and right in the row behind grabbed my arms and squeezed hard. I was going nowhere. The boy directly behind me put his hands over my breasts and squeezed harder. "Get off me!" I cried out, struggling against being held in my seat. Some of my experiences, I'm not going to lie, have been absolutely horrendous. I was spat at as a child. I'd been elbowed into the road, and one time I nearly got knocked over. You know, go back to where you came from and all this kind of business. My way of handling it was to write it down. I kept a diary as a teenager, and I wrote stories and mostly poems as a teenager, just pouring out all the anger I felt. As Maya Angelou stated, you should be angry, so use that anger. You write it, you paint it, you dance it, you march it, you vote it, you do everything about it. You talk it, never stop talking it. Amen.
I'd stopped going into bookshops and toy shops and gift shops when I realised that no matter where I went in them, all eyes were upon me. After all, it was one of those well-known cross-initiated facts that we Noughts didn't pay for anything when there was the chance of stealing it instead.
The character of Callum is very much your alter ego.
Yes. It was so easy to write because basically it was me as a teenager. So it was a bit of a cheat. A lot of the things that Callum goes through are based on true experiences that happened to me. Some of the ways Callum thinks about things and the injustice of what he's having to go through and how he's treated was very much how I felt at that time.
I didn't want to resent Seffi for the way my education was automatically assumed to be less important than hers. I didn't want to hate her because she was across and different to me. So I carried on looking out of the window, pushing the knots of loathing deeper inside me, deeper and deeper, the way I always did.
Callum is having to navigate all this stuff, and you can become very angry and bitter about it if you let it, and he feels the only way he can make things better is by becoming a terrorist.
As Callum loses everything dear to him, he joins a Noughts militia group and goes on the run.
The police didn't know my identity, my real name. They didn't even know what I looked like. I was careful that way. They just had the code name of our cell, Stiletto, like the very sharp, very deadly dagger. Isn't that ironic?
But what if Callum had resisted that path? What if he'd chosen a different route? I see the words "what if" always in your work.
For me, it's this idea of parallel worlds, so that there are other kind of Malories in different worlds living different lives. And it's kind of about the choices we make in life, and where I might have decided that I'm going to do X in this life, a Malorie in a parallel world will have gone a different route. And I'm just fascinated by the idea of all the choices we make. They lead us in a certain direction, they lead us down a certain path, but then it means all those other paths then are not taken. Daydreaming became my superpower. What if were an Olympic sport? I could have won a gold medal. What if I asked myself that question continually. What if I were invisible? What if I could fly? What if I could read minds? What if I knew instinctively when someone was lying? What if I could move objects with the wave of a finger, directed by the power of my thoughts? What if I lived in a home with radiators and a full fridge and didn't have to worry about anything but lessons and exams? For me, part of my what-ifs were kind of, what would happen if I had gone down this path instead of that path, and how would my life be different?
In Malorie's book, Thief, a teenage girl is accused of stealing. She's transported into the dystopian future, where she comes face to face with her older self.
The people here made us what we are. They owe us. But you didn't have to let them turn you into into a monster. You made yourself what you are, not the people of this town, Lydia argued. And I'm not like you. Not anymore. I don't hate anyone. No? asked old Lydia. No, Lydia said adamantly. We'll see. Old Lydia smiled.
Thief was this idea of, as a child or as a teen, meeting your grown-up self, and what happens if you hate the person you've become. When I was a teenager, it would have been so easy to hang on to anger and bitterness and the lack of trust I had in people, and I would have been a very different person, and it would have been very easy for me to be as angry now as I was then and not have a way to channel it. The truth is, none of us get to see what other paths or lives might exist for us if we had made different choices. But as an author, I get to imagine. I get to create and explore alternative paths or worlds and let my characters live in those spaces and places. As an author, I get to speculate.
6,000 people in the UK need a transplant.
25 years before science caught up with her imagination, Malorie speculated what might happen when a teenage boy receives a new kind of organ donation.
It's like this. I'm gonna have an operation soon. I've got a bad heart. I caught a viral infection almost 2 years ago, and it's still affecting me. My heart is slowly wasting away, so now I'm gonna get replaced. The thing is, because there aren't enough human heart donors, I'm going to get the heart of a pig.
When teenager Cameron becomes the first person to receive a pig heart transplant, he hopes to lead a normal life. Instead, he's condemned by friends, the media, and the public, who grapple with the ethics of his decision.
With Pickup Boy, as in all my books, I didn't want to say this is right and this is wrong. I want to write books which present a dilemma, and then you have to make up your own mind about what you would do if faced with similar challenges or you find yourself in similar circumstances.
It was taken as big subject and this big discussion around ethics and mortality and, you know, really difficult decisions that you have to make, and then bringing it into this lovely family.
I was quite young when I read that. It might have even been read to me by either my mum or a teacher. But I guess also in that story, it was just a child grappling with his mortality. And I think that's not something lots of authors broach with children.
One of the Earthlings is leaving the ship.
Malorie's speculative fiction is inspired by a genre she's loved since childhood: sci-fi.
I think part of the reason I love science fiction is the science of the possible, and it speaks to the fact that we have a future. As a human race, we have a future. I still love the Star Trek ideal. It was about exploration. It wasn't about war. It was about exploration. We'd got it together enough on this planet to go and explore the stars, and I love that message. Still do.
In science fiction, you've got this sort of sense of anticipation and what's going to happen next, we don't know. And we're living in a world now which is getting close to that point. We don't know.
In a way, it's the ultimate what if, because you can go in so many directions. A future has yet to be written, and we are in the process of writing it.
Keen to share her passion for fiction, Malorie's childhood dream was to become an English teacher. But at school, her career advisor had other ideas.
At the beginning, she said to me, "OK, Malorie, what do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to be an English teacher. I want to go to Goldsmiths College. I want to do an English and drama degree." And I had it all planned out. And it's one of those things where, you know, they say that man plans and God laughs. Why don't you be a secretary instead, is what the first thing she said. And I said, "I don't want to be a secretary. I want to be a teacher, an English teacher." And she said, "Well, you know, black people don't do that." When she saw my face, because I was horror-struck, she said, "Well, OK, then, well, why don't you do business studies?" So that's what I ended up doing, knowing it was a mistake before I went.
On the business studies course at Huddersfield Poly, Malorie's new hobby, Kung Fu, provided much-needed relief. But things went from bad to worse.
I remember it was mid-October, and I was having a Kung Fu lesson, and halfway through it, I thought, I don't feel right. And it got worse and worse as the lesson was going on, to the point where I had this excruciating pain in my stomach, and I'd never felt pain like it. Felt like I was being sawn in half. I just slid down the wall and I couldn't move. I remember collapsing in the hallway, and then it's kind of like snapshots. Being in the ambulance, rushed to hospital, and then I remember waking up, but I had my eyes shut, and there was the doctor and a nurse, and the doctor said, it's a shame about this case, because she's going to be dead before she's 30.
He didn't.
I swear to God,
Did
Scott.
he know you were listening?
No, he thought I was out for the count. He thought I was asleep.
Oh.
So he said that to the nurse, and she said, oh yes, I read her case notes, and then they moved on to the next bed. And I thought, what the hell? I felt like I was on death row, and and I had a finite amount of time, and then that would be it.
Sickle cell is an incurable, hereditary, and sometimes fatal disease, affecting almost exclusively black people.
Malorie discovered she had sickle cell disease, which would reduce her life expectancy and cause frequent painful episodes, impacting on her quality of life.
I'm drowning in this roaring silence. I'm drowning. I'm going to die. I look up through the grey-white shimmers of the swimming pool water. High above me, I can see where the quality of the light changes. The surface. But it's meters above me. It might as well be kilometers. The chlorine stings my eyes. My lungs are on fire. Just one breath. Just one.
Was Pig Heart Boy partly based on that experience as well?
Yeah, because I knew how it felt to have a time span and have a use-by date. When I came back down to London to recuperate, I thought, well, if I'm going to die before 30, I'm not going to spend 3 of those years doing business studies. And so one of the worst moments in my life actually turned out to be one of the best moments in my life, because it was the spur for me to get off my backside and think, okay, if I've got a limited amount of time, I'm going to do it doing something I love.
If I don't take a breath, I'll burst. If I do take a breath, I'll drown. Some choice, no choice. I close my eyes, praying hard, and I kick.
In 1980, Malorie achieved her ambition and won a place at Goldsmiths to study English literature and drama. But first, she needed money, so she took on a temping job in a computing firm.
I'd never even touched a computer before then, and I got hooked. I loved computing. So it got to closer to September, and I gave up my course at Goldsmiths, and I stayed in computing for 9 years. But that software house was where I met my hubby. So that's where Neil and I first met. He was from Edinburgh, and he was just a good laugh. And he kept dropping hints that he was more than interested in me. And they were just going straight over my head.
Malorie married this 6-foot Scotsman from Edinburgh, and he helped change the course of her life and her work. You said at one point in an interview that I often wonder, would I have written Noughts and Crosses if I hadn't started going out with Neil?
You know, when we first started going out in the sort of 80s, and I remember the comments we'd get and the looks we got, it gave me an insight into what it was like to be in that kind of relationship, but it also gave me an insight into some of the assumptions he had about me and my life and my heritage. I remember we were in WH Smith's. Sorry, Neil, he hates me telling this story, but I'm going to tell it anyway. We were in WH Smith's, and they had rack upon rack of magazines, all kinds of subjects, fashion magazines, crafts, whatever. And they had exactly two magazines that had black people on the cover. So of course I made a dive for those. You know, Neil said to me at the time, he said, well, why do you have magazines like that? He said, you don't have magazines for white people like that. And I looked at him, I said, Neil, what do you call these acres of magazines that have all got white faces on? And I saw him looking, and it was like it was the first time it had clicked. And that was a seed that kind of got planted for later on when I wrote Noughts and Crosses. It's just fascinating to me, the things that the minority will, in any society, will see that the majority just don't, because they don't have to.
My black lady listens to me.
Stirred by restlessness, pushed by
Have a mango. Sweet, rain-washed, sun-ripe mango.
In the mid-80s, Malorie finally found the answer to a question she'd been asking for 20 years.
that I never looked at all these years.
Black writers did exist.
A number of these books are actually the first books I encountered that featured black characters, and The Thief in the Village is the first one I ever saw that had a black child on the cover on a children's book. So that book is very dear to my heart. I mean, this one here, this was my very first novel that I read, written by a black author about a black character, The Colour Purple by Alice Walker. I must have read that about 4 or 5 times. And Benjamin Zephaniah, I remember devouring all his poetry. It was a feeling of not just joy in coming across them and seeing that someone like me was in sort of literature, but it was also this feeling of I'd been lied to. I would love to have come across these books as a child, but I came across them when I did, and I think they were formative in me feeling that, okay, I want to write too. I want to write for the child in me who I felt missed out on having all of these wonderful books in my life.
And this is where it all began. At London's biggest adult education college, City Lit.
I was just strolling down Drury Lane and saw a sign on a lamppost saying City Lit that way. All these courses, dance, drama, writing, acting, and I just thought, wow. To be honest, I kind of wonder if I would be here if I hadn't stumbled across this place. When I joined my first writing course, which was Ways into Writing, the tutor was a woman called Carol Burns. And for about a term and a bit, every time it came to my turn to read, I'd say, "Not today, Carol." She'd give us exercises and I would always do them, but I didn't want to read my stuff out. So it got to the point where she said, "Laurie, would you like to read your work out?" And I'd say, "Not today, Carol." And then she said, "Laurie, do you want to be a writer?" And I said, "More than anything else in the world." And then she said to me, "Well, you're going to have to shit or get off the pot, love." And, it was like, well, everyone burst out laughing. And it was so mortifying, but I just thought, you know what? She's so right. If I'm going to do this, I'm going to have to do this. You're going to have to let people see your work. That's part of the process.
Encouraged by her tutors and her peers, Malorie began sending her work to publishers, stories featuring black children.
This precious thing. Most people would have thrown this in a dustbin.
Yeah, well, I guess I wanted to file them and keep them because I knew I wanted to be a writer. I had hoped that one day I'd be a published writer, and so I wanted to kind of have a record of the journey to that.
These are all the rejections that you got. How many were there?
82 before I had my first book published. When you find the thing that you feel you're born to do, you don't let it go in a hurry.
Let's gently open, shall we?
If you want to start from the very first one I had, that would be there.
Dear Mrs. Blackman, it was very nice to talk to you on the telephone today, and a great coincidence. So you must have been feeling quite optimistic at this point. But you should call at precisely the time I was dealing with your manuscript. I hope that rejection on this occasion is not too disappointing.
It was. This is Sarah and the Wicked Witch. Uninspiring title, but there you go. Should have called it something else.
We have considered this proposal most carefully, but regret we do not feel able to publish it successfully in book form.
Oh, there's a PS there, but...
Oh, it's a PS, yeah? PS, we did enjoy your manuscript and found it quite gripping. Unfortunately, our fiction list is very full, and we feel unable to make an offer for your manuscript. However, we do wish you luck with it elsewhere.
Oh, see? That's nice, isn't it? I mean, this is your standard thing, because they just put the name and the name of the text there. But the fact that she wrote a bit of a handwritten thing at the back there, that's not too bad.
That's number one. Gives you a bit of hope, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You obviously write very competently. I don't like the word competent, personally, but I'm afraid that we cannot accept your work for publication.
Indeed. Same book.
I love that word disappointing. Sort of obviously it's in there. We recommend that you take a look at what is currently selling well in a few bookshops in your area.
Yeah, well.
At least they kept replying to
Yes,
you.
that's true. I mean, ABC were very encouraging, actually, where they took the time to actually tell me why it wasn't working. I really appreciated that. And because I felt that if they were taking the time to tell me why it wasn't working, then maybe they saw something in the writing, it was just a story that was failing. So I should keep going. So that said, I was very grateful for all the critiques that editors sent to me. It was just the sheer volume of them that kind of got me down towards about the 70th rejection letter.
The endless rejections began taking their toll on Mallory's state of mind.
Around about, was it my 50th or 60th rejection? I started having really, really terrifying nightmares. I'd wake up kind of shivering and shaking and in a cold sweat. And after about the third, fourth night of this, I thought, okay, I'm going to write these down. I suppose it was my way of trying to control the nightmare, because then I would take the essence of that nightmare and turn it into a story.
Dying was a great disappointment to me. I had expected burning, choking flames and demons and screams of rage and pain. I had hoped for soothing bright lights and smiles and flowers, but what I got was Payne's cemetery. Payne's cemetery was really two cemeteries divided by a line of solid, majestic oak trees. On one side, my side, were the bodies of the people. On the other side were the bodies of what we called the others.
Mallory's nightmarish stories became a collection called Not So Stupid, and in 1990 she submitted it to a publishing house.
Tell me what it was like to get your first yes.
It said, "Dear Malorie Blackman, we would love to publish your story." And I actually stood in my hall and I went, ah! I was so happy. And it was just amazing. And my husband came charging down the stairs going, "What's the matter? What's the matter?" I said, "I'm going to publish my story." And he couldn't get sort of word out of me for like the next 10 minutes. But I was overjoyed because finally I'd got someone to say yes and I could call myself a published author. So, yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you, Alan.
Now, with a short story collection under her belt, Malorie quit her job in the world of computing. But what she learnt there seemed the perfect subject for her first novel.
You know, this is a blast from the past.
I know.
Floppy disk.
These are antiques.
Oh, well, this is from, I think this is Hacker from 1991.
Oh, there it is. Oh, look at that.
One of the first pieces of advice they give you when you start on these writing courses and things is write what you know. So you should write what you care about. But I thought, I know computing. So I sat down at my computer and I typed Hacker, chapter 1, and then I just started. And 8 months later, I typed the end. I had 50,000 words, 200 odd pages. And I thought, yes, I've written my first novel. And so I sent it off to my agent, and who sent it off to Transworld Publishers. And they invited me in to talk about it. And I thought, yes, they're going to publish my story. And I was so thrilled.
Sadly, Transworld were not offering Malorie a publishing deal, merely constructive criticism on why her story didn't work.
Broke my heart, but I took the whole lot and put it in the bin, and I started again from scratch. So I kept the title. Everything else in that story changed. Sent it off to them again, and they said, "Yeah, we love this," and they published it. But it taught me a lesson, because it made me think about novels in the way I thought about programming, where you have to design them first and work them out. Otherwise, if you go launch straight into it, it's going to be full of bugs. Arrested? You must be joking. For what? Yeah, I stared at Mum, utterly shocked. I think I was more shocked than if Mum had said that Dad had been knocked over.
Arrested. It was a word you heard on the telly and in films, not something that happened to your dad in real life. I looked at Mum. I couldn't take my eyes off of her. The bank says that your dad took over £1 million. £1 million. I coughed. I couldn't get the words out.
It's a detective story, a mystery story in which the child is the detective, really, essentially.
Exactly.
He always said that programming was like solving a good detective story. You had to put the pieces together so that they fitted like a jigsaw, and if you had bugs or mistakes in your program, then you had to hunt them down, just like a detective. That's why I like programming and computing so much, because I like puzzles. That's why Dad and I were so alike.
What Malorie was doing in her books was saying, these black kids are just kids. They also go on adventures. They also get to discover things about themselves and their family and growing up. And you remember those stories.
When you started writing, before Noughts and Crosses, there was a resistance, was there not, to putting black children on the cover?
Yes, I did get that. And it was kind of like, how do you see your characters? And I'd say black. In my experience, most children want to read about people outside of their own experience. The problem is the gatekeepers.
When you think of an editor, let's be honest, do they look like me? Do they sound like me? Do they have the upbringing that I've had?
Publishing itself is still predominantly white, still predominantly middle class, still predominantly, I think, without a diversity of experience. So I don't believe that publishers always understand books that that are written by authors outside of those experiences.
Even finding people who could illustrate those books in the right way was tough, wasn't it?
It was, actually. It was really difficult. I've come across some illustrators who can draw the one black face, and they change the hairstyle, but it's the one black face. I kind of feel that it's important to get that right and to have recognizable characters on them, not just caricatures.
Malorie is of Bayesian descent, and I snuck in a little nod to that in the mum's colour code and Bayesian headscarf.
In 2018, Malorie chose illustrator Dapo Adiola to work with her on the picture book We're Going to Find the Monster.
There was excitement, and then it was followed by a little bit of trepidation, because I was like, oh my God, like, this is huge. Under 1% or just above 1% of children's books at the time had people of colour as lead characters. And then I think even less than that had people of colour making the children's books. Malorie's been advocating for decades now, and only now are we seeing what's starting to feel a little bit like lasting change.
Don't die on me. I said, young black king, don't die on me. You my brother, you my keeper, I need you to keep an eye on me. And no more fighting on the streets, walking around with all this pride on me. The picture isn't pretty, but it's perfect. Tedious question, so then I curve it. Serena or Venus, the way I serve it. I'm Malorie Blackman, the way I sell books. I jump on the stage and then the world looks. All that banging on my door had my girl shook. That sorry officer, I only sell hooks. Leave me alone. Every little L I took.
When did you first hear that song with your name in it?
Somebody texted me to say, you're in the Stormzy song. And I thought, oh, you're joking. But I listened to it and I got a name check and it was wonderful. And so I called my daughter and I said, listen to this. And I didn't tell her, what it was. And I remember she was listening to it and then it's like her eyes popped out of her head and it was like, oh my God. And she said, Tiny Temper's giving you a name check and Stormzy's giving you a name check. She said, do these people know how uncool you are? Which made me crack up laughing. And I thought, no, and I'm glad they don't. But I was so flattered. I just thought, it's this sort of thing, even I with my imagination couldn't have made up, but it was brilliant.
Stormzy set up his publishing imprint, Murky Books, in 2018, aiming to bring a new diversity to mainstream publishing. Malorie's book, Just Saying, is its first major memoir.
It's no secret that Stormzy loves Malorie Blackman. It's so instrumental to his childhood, his grasp on storytelling. And if we were going to go after a massive literary legend, if we were going to do the first memoir we've really done on the imprint, it's kind of a no-brainer to start with Malorie Blackman.
The face in number 2 is more prominent, but then I think this kind of gets lost at the top.
I think there's a version of Malorie Blackman which exists, a version of Malorie Blackman which she has felt safe giving to the world. And this book is almost a closer look into the moments which made her. The first reading of her autobiography was delivered to me in a version of letters to Tara, her daughter who she never got to meet.
Tara, I think of you, not every day, not even every other day, but I do think of you, often. You were so wanted, so loved, when you were still just a dot inside me. I couldn't wait to meet you, greet you, hold you, hug you, lift you, love you. When I had my miscarriage and they said, would you like to see her? I just thought, I can't see my dead daughter. And Neil kept saying, I think you should, I think you should, Laurie, I think you should. And then I said, okay, I will. They brought her to me and she was like, she could fit in the palm of my hand at 14 weeks, perfectly formed. And it took me a long, long time to get over it. And there would be times when I'd be trying to write or I'd just be going about, doing ordinary stuff. And I would just burst into tears thinking about what I'd lost. At 14 weeks pregnant, you were so real to me, Tara. I was planning for your first steps, your first words, your first period, your first kiss, your first steady partner, your wedding. I was anticipating it all. But you were gone. I've always found poetry a really good way of speaking in the moment, speaking from the heart, expressing raw emotion, I guess. I still wonder about you. On days of joy or sorrow, I wonder about you. When I wrote that chapter about losing Tara, I tried doing it as prose and I was constantly censoring myself. And then I tried it as verse and it just seemed to hit harder and it was more honest. Your looks, your height, your likes, your loves, who and what you would have been, could have been. I still wonder about you. I was kind of warned that I'd probably only be able to have one child. So if I had Tara, I would never have got to know Liz. And I can't imagine my life without my daughter. But I'm greedy. I wanted to have all my children, but I'm grateful I had the one.
Motherhood inspired Malorie's first experiments, writing poetry for children with Cloudbusting, a story centered around a nasty trick that goes wrong.
Davy's handsome face erupted red and swollen with angry highs, slapping and mapping his skin. Then the laughter stopped.
Cloudbusting is a story of a small boy who sees the world differently, and the class bully who discovers his weakness, a peanut allergy.
When my daughter was 3, I gave her a peanut for the first time, and within 30 seconds, she said, I can't breathe, and her lips started swelling up, her eyelids started puffing up, and she was going like this, and I thought, oh my God, and I knew exactly what was going on. So she was straight in the car down the hospital, and it was terrifying.
Davy's hands through his throat, clawing at the invisible hands, choking him from the inside out. The whites of his eyes were turning red. He couldn't breathe. He dropped to his knees, then fell to his floor, his eyes on me.
Cloudbusting is a wonderful book. It is incredibly powerful, and again, what Malorie can do, it's this really good way in which she can get beneath the skin of children's relationships, and the form of poetry is ideal for it because it's fragmented. So it doesn't have to resolve so that you're left questioning things and things are sort of left hanging over.
I know you think I'm different, unique, special, individual. The word I'm looking for is weird, I said. Davy grinned. Well, I'm glad the worst thing in the world, no, the worst thing in the universe, would be to look and walk and talk and think like everyone else.
First things first, I'ma say all the words inside my head.
The first time I went to the Comic-Con, I kind of was walking around thinking, these are my people, you know, it was lovely. It's such an inclusive, joyous atmosphere. The space has always had diverse characters and people dressed up as diverse characters as well. It's the only place where you can walk down the street and you've got great big swords and whatever and you're not being stopped by the police.
This is what happens when a sci-fi fanatic becomes Children's Laureate. Smuggled into London's Comic-Con is a literary festival for teenagers. The Young Adult Literature Convention, known to its fans as the YALC.
Malorie Blackman actually initiated this fantastic convention, and I think all power to Malorie. She's always been a sort of get up and go person, and she's not afraid of saying, well, why can't we do this and let's do that.
Malorie became Children's Laureate in 2013, tasked with promoting literature to young people.
When I heard that Malorie was going to be the Children's Laureate, I went, yes.
If as a teen you're disenchanted with reading or you say, I don't like reading, my answer is always, you haven't found the right books for you yet because they're out there, believe me.
Children's Laureates have to be a spokesperson for children's books. So you're the go-to person for the press to talk to about what's happening in children's books, what matters in children's books, or even if there are some scandals going on, what do you, as the Children's Laureate, think about this?
The Children's Laureate Malorie Blackman fears that black and mixed ethnicity readers...
There was an appalling and disgusting moment during the time that Malorie was Children's Laureate when one of the news outlets said that she said there were too many white faces in children's books. What she had said was that children's books need more diversity. It's a completely different statement.
The racists came at me and it was kind of, oh, you effing monkey and you effing this and you effing that and go back to where you came from and how dare you and this isn't your country. Sky News apologised, but then I actually got death threats and I got threats against my husband and my daughter. And, you know, I feel I'm big enough and ugly enough to tell these people where to go, but you don't threaten my daughter. So I was really angry.
All the paranoid fantasies of racists were expressed in that one headline, which she hadn't said. In a way, of course, it reinforced exactly what she says in Noughts and Crosses, that, you know, when there's this kind of domination in the media of what is said, things are distorted.
Hate crimes on the rise in Albion. According to official Department for National Statistics figures, there's been a sharp rise in the number of hate crimes reported to the police since the general election.
There's so much of what you talk about, which we were talking about and worrying about 20, 30, 40 years ago, which are even more extreme today than they were then.
Exactly. That's the thing. We haven't made any progress. In fact, in some quarters, things have got worse.
First published in 2001, Noughts and Crosses started as a one-off, grew into a series of 6 books and 3 novellas, and is now a major drama series on the BBC.
Sophie? What the hell are you doing here?
I don't know, I had to do something.
You can't be here, this is not safe.
No, we should see your friend. Come on!
You always thought it was a continuing story. You plotted the book out, but you also tried to reflect the moment, the time, didn't you?
Indeed. With Double Cross and then Crossfire and Endgame, they were very much reflecting the times that I wrote them.
All of these people will have EU passports. We are much less safe as part of this European Union.
People like Trump and his racist rhetoric and build that wall and all sorts. People take their lead from the top, and so if that's the rhetoric at the top, then other people feel, well, I can say what I like.
Toby Durbridge, Shadow Home Secretary for the opposition Democratic Alliance Party and Prime Ministerial candidate, has spoken out against confirmed residential status, the government ruling that requires all those of Fenno-Scandian heritage who were not born in Britain to apply for confirmed residential status.
The government is forced to apologise for what it calls its appalling treatment of Windrush immigrants. Some who've been here most of their lives have already lost their jobs, lost benefits, and been detained.
Immigrants are such an easy scapegoat, which is why I must admit the whole Windrush thing so annoyed me, because it was this idea that my mum and dad were invited here. They were invited here to do the jobs that white people didn't want to do. And so they came here hoping for a better future for not just themselves, but for their children. And then for the government to turn around and say, if you can't prove that you belong here, we're going to kick you out.
It is outrageous that Fenno-Scandians who came into the country as babies or young children and who might now be in their 70s and 80s are being told to apply to stay in their own country, said Toby Durbridge at today's opposition news briefing. A number of my constituents have recently asked me if the current government is deliberately doubling down on deporting as many Noughts as possible in the hope of skewing the voting in the forthcoming election.
Even in the worst of the National Front and the BNP and so forth, I always considered myself British, always. And I thought, you might not think so, but I am British, so you're just going to have to lump it. In all honesty, I've begun to wonder. I just thought, you know, is there going to come a point where the government are going to say, no, you're not British? Go back to where you came from, or where your parents came from, or where your grandparents came from. Will we get to that point?
The hood is over my head and hangs down to my shoulders.
20 years after being killed off in Noughts and Crosses, Callum fleetingly returns.
Please, God, I don't want to die. I just want to see her one last time.
In Endgame, Callum appears to Sephi in a vision.
This dream while I'm dying is the best one I've ever had. I never want it to end. Can I go with you? Let me go with you. Please, I plead. He stands up and reaches out to me. I place my hand in his. There's nothing I can't do when my hand is in his. I get to my feet. We smile and hold each other. Just hold each other. I exhale slowly, pain-free. And when we kiss, I'm finally warm again.
I would never write a hopeless ending in any of my books because I think there's always hope.
Endgame is it?
Yes, it is. Mind you see, never say never, because I've said that before. At the end of Checkmate, I said, that's it, I'm not writing any more. And then, of course, there was 3 more novels. But I really do feel that's it.
His respiratory system is shutting down. The levels in the isocortex are still falling. Damn. Prepare Cordicine seriously.
So if you could go back, would you change anything? Rather like Patrick Stewart in Star Trek.
I love Star Trek. I mean, anyone who knows me will tell you I love Star Trek. But there was a particular episode in The Next Generation with Patrick Stewart, who's such a wonderful actor, and it was called Tapestry. And it was one of those episodes where he gets the chance to go back and change his past.
We're simply riddled with regrets about our youth now, aren't we?
And it changes his entire life, and he hates it. And I kind of feel there are so many things I'd love to go back and change, but then if I had the chance to, I don't think I really would, because unraveling just one strand of that might change the entire outcome of my life, and we probably wouldn't be sitting here now.
Coming now to where we are now, where you are now, there's this dramatic moment in your life when you're told you'll be dead by the time you're 30 when you get sickle cell.
I don't expect to see 80, but that said, I'm 60, I got double what he said.
You've always got a way of seeing a good side.
I'm a silver lining girl.
Yeah.
Every day I wake up and I think, I'm still here. I open the curtains and I look out at the sky, be it laughter blue, misery grey, or rage red, tinged with passionate orange, and it's always beautiful. And I think, I'm still here.